Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article, to a photograph, to a competition, to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear, might just get the chip, and he does, he's scored! Oh, what a great pass! He's done it! Oh, brilliant! Wiggling his way, that's an excellent one, and Dini! It's a goal, forward for Clydebank. Excellent play by Hughes. I think the player of the match, and sweetly finished by Penny.
And this week our guest is Paul Power. Paul played over 500 games during a 13-year professional career in England. Made his debut for Manchester City as a 21-year-old on Wednesday the 27th of August 1975 in a 1-0 defeat away to Aston Villa. Among his teammates that day were Asa Hartford, Colin Bell, Alan Oakes, Rodney Marsh and Dennis Stewart. And his final league game came on Saturday 7th May 1988 for Everton at Goodison Park. When they went down 2-1 to Arsenal, and alongside him and his team that day were Neville Southall, Graham Sharp, Peter Reid and Trevor Stephen. Paul, thanks for coming along and joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We've picked out a shoot magazine for you today, and it's from the 26th of August 1978, so I'll hand over to Tom.
So on the front cover we've got Martin O'Neill of Nottingham Forest and Clive Woods of Ipswich Town. And this is obviously start of the season. As free inside, full colour league ladders and first set of team tabs, a popular part of shoot with the league ladders. And it says kick off the new season with Britain's brightest soccer magazine. And we've got a Manchester City team group in colour, and the cover price is 15p. So Paul, when you were young, did you buy shoot in the likes when you were growing up?
I didn't buy it. But I always read it. You know, there were always shoot magazines around the dressing room, or if I was travelling somewhere on the coach or on the train, you know, then I might purchase it to sort of keep abreast of what was going on at other clubs and the like. You know, but never actually ordered it week by week.
Right.
Was there any of the magazines that you would have got back then, like a Go or Charles Buchan's Football Monthly, things like that?
No. I when I was a little bit older, when I was coaching, I used to buy 442 magazine, but that was more to sort of it was more a coaching magazine than it was a football story magazine, you know.
Yeah. And
when I was really young, I used to buy the Valiant comic, and that had lots of football stories in it, you know, like cartoons and the like. But nah, I've never been an avid reader, to be fair. Even though, you know, I studied law at university, and I think I had my fill of reading by the time at university, to be fair.
what about, because I collect all the magazines, and I collect football cards, stickers, books and things like that. Did you ever collect, like, say, the football cards or stickers, anything like that?
No, never. I was even though I played as a kid, I never collected them. My son did, and he's 38 now. But he's when he was younger, when we went away on holiday, because we had a motorhome, and trying to keep the kids occupied while we're driving down to the south of France was easy for Nicky, because we'd just get him a Panini sticker book, and a few packs of Panini stickers, and leave him to it. Like, you know, my daughter was a little bit more difficult to keep occupied, but yeah. So we I was aware of them, you know, and he was obviously always trying to get a full album.
Yeah. Was he trying to get his dad the cards and the stickers of his dad as well?
Yeah. He used to. He used to swap about 10 of mine for one of Lou McCarthy, or something like that.
That's worth it.
So we go into the magazine then. So pages 2 and 3. Like we're saying, it's the start of a new season. So shoots previewing, looking a wee bit at the season past and previewing the season to come. And so there's a wee editorial there. The only thing certain in an ever-changing game, it's headlined. It just has a wee look at what they think's going to happen over the course of the season. And of course, this is the season just gone where Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest has kind of surprised people by winning the First Division, and Liverpool had won their second European Cup in a row.
I think had City finished, was it third they'd finished that season? Third or fourth, was it?
Yeah, fourth the season before, I believe. A couple of seasons before that, we finished runners-up to Liverpool. Mm-hmm. I think we lost we lost the league by 1 point.
Right.
Tony Buck was the manager then. And, we had Bill Taylor, who was he was an England coach. I think Peter Swales, who was the chairman, wanted Tony Buck as the manager because of his association with City, and obviously he will have known a lot of the players in the dressing room that you just referred to: Joe Corrigan, Tommy Booth, Glyn Pardo, and Alan Oakes. And so he was a perfect man for the job, but he probably didn't have the coaching background. When he initially took over as manager, so they decided to bring in Bill Taylor, who was an England regional coach at the time, and was a real honest footballing man. All his sessions were really interesting, So the combination of the two was a little bit like sort of Malcolm Allison and Joe Mercer, from years gone by.
So it was a good strong league at that time. There were a number of teams that were challenging for the title every season, and I think just about every team could give you a game at that time in the First Division, Paul.
Yeah, that's true. Certainly, Forest, Liverpool, Man United. During that period, they'd be up there all the time, and then of course Spurs were just introducing foreign players, which no doubt we'll come on to later on. And I think they were the first team to probably introduce foreign players to their lineup, and then they were followed later by other clubs, ourselves included. So we'll maybe speak about that later.
Just talking about the Villa and Ardiles, I know that there's a letters page in this where, and I'm sure we'll get to it, Tom, there seems to be a bit of an uproar about bringing in two foreign stars, outside, the Scotland, England, Wales and Ireland. And you just think how far we've come from those days where just two people coming into the league could make a big, as I say, a big uproar about things.
Definitely true. I mean, I look at Manchester City's squad now, and there's only Phil Foden there, really, who's from the Greater Manchester area.
Right.
When I played for City, and you'll probably show the team photograph that was taken in 1978 for this magazine, and I'll point out there that the lads that were local to Manchester, at the time, we must have had out of a squad of 20 players, there would have been 14 or 15 that were from the Greater Manchester area. Whether it was sort of Greater Manchester itself, Oldham, maybe going out down the East Lancs towards Liverpool. Where you've got the St Helens and that sort. There were a lot of local players in the squad. I love Phil Foden because he actually puts the mank in Manchester City at the moment, which is important.
Yeah.
Although the supporters might disagree, that as long as they're having, the success that they're having at the moment, then I don't think the supporters will be bothered whether the players are from Argentina, Brazil, or wherever, like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's big changes for City over the last sort of, 12 years or so, eh? Well, what was your feelings at first when the sort of big money rolled in at Manchester City around about, 2008 or something?
Yeah. Well, I was involved as a coach at the academy then.
Right.
Jim Cassell was the head of the academy at the time. The club had done really well getting players like Sean Wright-Phillips through and Joey Barton, and you know there were quite a few young players that actually came into the first team. So we thought we were doing all right, but you know I think the vision of the people that were taking over was far in excess of perhaps what was being provided at the time there, and since then, of course, they've gone on to develop the youth program extraordinarily. My son works for the academy now as not as a coach, as an administrator, but you know the number of staff. I think probably when I worked there would have been about 15 or 20 staff in recruitment and coaching. Now I think the Christmas party this year there were about 74 members of staff, you know, so it's unbelievable that we used to have a physiotherapist for the whole of the academy. Now they have a physiotherapist for each particular age group. Yeah. So the under nines have got a physiotherapist. They've got a match analyst, so they actually watch their games with a match analyst and the coach, and they explain after the Sunday games where they can improve next week, and so it's very, very much like the sort of situation that they had at Ajax in years gone by, when all those great Dutch players came through the system there, because they were actually at the club at Ajax from the age of 6, and now that is exactly the same situation. With academies in England, and players can sign now when they're 8 years of age. When I was playing, you had to be 14 before you could actually align yourself to a football club. So the whole situation has changed. I think probably to the detriment of English schools football, which won't be as strong now as it was in my day. I mean, I actually played for a team called St Anthony's in Wythenshawe. We won the Manchester Schools Trophy under 11s. There were 360 teams in the competition. When I was coaching at City, we had a young lad who was playing for Manchester City, who went to St Anthony's at the time. He played in the team that was the next team after the one that I'd played for, to win the Greater Manchester Schools Trophy, and there were 36 teams in it. So, schools football has sort of fallen by the wayside, but I think the standard of academy football has improved dramatically, and certainly the provision for the young players, it's absolutely fantastic these days.
I've always, talking about schools football there, I've always thought that certainly in Scotland, when that finished, because it finished when I was in secondary school, and I remember there was teacher strikes and things like that, and it would have been mid 80s or something like that, early to mid 80s. And for me, I always think that that's part of the reason why there was a decline in Scottish football in terms of the quality. I think the schools football added a competitive edge to football that wasn't there at other places. And so I always rue the lack of school football. I think it was very important. Certainly back then, as you say, there's a lot more academies and the quality is a lot better now. But I think for a period of time, not having the schools football was a big gap.
Yeah. I always remember when I was with Pat Nevin at Everton, and Pat had a little video going of him actually playing in the sort of back. I used to call it a ginnel, but like a back alley behind his house. Yeah. And he'd keep the ball up against the wall, and he'd play it against one wall and then bounce it off another wall, and he'd have 1,000 touches in about half an hour, and no wonder his touch was developed as a young footballer as well. And I think that street football has gone out of the English culture because there's so much traffic on the roads now. Parents are afraid to let the players let the children play near the road. So yeah, there are quite a few combinations probably of the reason. I wouldn't say there's a decline in football because I think the quality of academy football now is fantastic. I also think there are a lot of ex-players that are now coaches, and the young players can draw on their experiences from their own careers, whereas schools football, primary school football generally, was most of the teachers were women, so there wasn't that much sort of coaching football experience about. We were lucky at St Anthony's because we had a chap called Des Murphy who was in charge of Manchester Boys at the time, and another teacher called Paul Bell, and they sort of were able to help us and put on coaching sessions that would develop us, but they didn't have that at all the schools, unfortunately.
So back into the magazine there, just one wee thing I wanted to point out there. So they've got a milestones to look out for in 1978-79, and it mentions that Manchester City's 28th league game will be their 3,000th. And having looked it up, the Manchester City's 3,000th league game was Saturday 3rd of March 1979 at home to Bolton Wanderers, where Man City won 2-1 with Mick Shannon and Gary Owen scoring the goals, and Frank Worthington scored for Bolton.
Right, yeah. Bolton had a good team then. They had Peter Reid started there before he went to Everton, and they were Sam Allardyce was there. They had
Frank Worthington had been there at the time.
Yeah, Frank Worthington.
Yeah, Frank Worthington. He just said scored the goal. Yeah, and of course he scored that magnificent goal that was voted goal of the season, where he flicked it over his head and then volleyed it from the edge of the box. So yeah, they had some really good players, and were well organised as a group as well. So yeah, there were. It's like you say, there were Ipswich were coming into the fore, so clubs were developing all the time, and as you say, you weren't sure of getting. You were never sure of getting a result. Unlike today, where you would back Liverpool, if they were playing at home, to win whoever they were playing against, So it made it a little bit more interesting, perhaps.
Right, so Andy, you get anything else you want to say about anything on these 2 pages?
Just about the milestones thing. Just the thing that I took from that was back in the shoot magazines, there wasn't really a lot about stats and little pieces of information like that, and this is pretty uncommon through the magazines that I've seen, that they actually have all this a lot of it's the same sort of information, just for different clubs and different numbers, but things like that, stats, it wasn't a big thing in the game back then, whereas now you've got your expected goals and all that stuff, which I've never even bothered trying to get my head around.
Well, when I started playing and coaching, Malcolm Allison was quite heavily into statistical analysis of his own team and the teams that we were playing against. He'd always write up a report of the opponents. We used to sit on the team coach and read, and then sit with him, and he'd talk about the player that was coming immediately up against me. So if I was playing against Chelsea and I was playing against Pat Nevin, then it would be a totally different instruction that I would get than if I was playing against Franz Carr, for instance, at Nottingham Forest. So he was quite keen on preparing players individually for that sort of for the coming game, if you like. When I went to Everton, they were much more. That was Howard Kendall and Colin Harvey, and this is later. This is 86, by the way. but they were more concerned about the unit of the team and the unit of a back four. I'd never actually been taught how to hold the line, when to drop and when to press until I went to Everton, and I was 32, 33 then. So each coach has its, every coach that I worked for helped me. But they all had a different way of doing it, I think
it's amazing to hear that it took to that age before that part of the game that you took it on board and understood about it all, because obviously nowadays it's part and parcel. It's all about tactics and shape and group and things like that. So it's absolutely amazing to hear that it wasn't until you went to Everton that it sort of either clicked or it was shown to you, and then there it was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was at City, I worked with coaches. I just said Bill Taylor and Malcolm Allison. They were quality coaches, but they worked with us as a back four, but they never worked with us in relation to the midfield. Perhaps they'd do sessions with the back four. At Everton, everything was linked. So if the player on the ball, if the opponent had time on the ball, then you were ready to drop as a back four because the player had time to deliver, and he'd deliver a pass behind the back four. If he did, we had Kevin Ratcliffe there, who was quick as lightning, who would probably sweep things up anyway. And also, they were rarely the opposition midfield players rarely had time on the ball, because we had Peter Reid and Paul Bracewell who would really press the ball in the middle of the park, get the player's head down, so he couldn't lift up and hit a telling pass that was going to break past the back four and maybe put Neville Southall under pressure. So and we worked on that understanding all week. It was from the Monday morning we would be working on the opponents from the following week, what their strengths and weaknesses were, but more importantly, how we would work together as a team to combat that. So yeah, fantastic times.
Sorry, will we move on then, Andy? Go over the page. So next couple of pages. So we've got a wee ask the expert. There's a few wee questions in there. Anything you spotted there, Andy?
Just the bit about Graham Taylor there, actually, with Watford, and just looking at his career was, that spell was, I think he got from Division 4 to Division 1 5 seasons, and that's absolutely incredible. I mean, I'm a big fan of Graham Taylor, and I think it's four years. I don't know if it's today, 4 years since he's passed, I think.
Right.
But promoted Division 4 to Division 3, 77, 78, then promoted the next season into Division 2, where they spent another couple of seasons, and then promoted into Division 1 season 81, 82. I mean, that's remarkable, absolutely remarkable record.
I know, and so this year that you're talking about here, they just got into the 4th division, and then I remember playing against Watford for Everton. And they had a fantastic team at the time with the likes of Luther Blissett and
Nigel Callahan, John Barnes.
Yeah, and I can't remember his name now, but they had a curly-haired right winger who was always a bit of a problem. He was quite quick, but he'd also come inside, and he'd cause you problems himself. I can't remember his name now, but I do remember him because he'd always cause me problems. But you see, Graham Taylor, when I'd finished football and I went working for the PFA, and I was in charge, if you like, but I was the chief administrator of a coaching magazine a thesis that we'd put together, and it was all about youth football, youth coaches. And I contacted every club in the Football League, and very rarely got an answer from a manager. But I went and spoke to Graham Taylor. He was so hands-on with everything that happened in the youth at his club, the development of the players at his club. There was Joe Royle was another one who sort of came and I spoke to him with Jim Cassell, who was his recruitment officer at the time, and then the other one was manager at Bournemouth, who's I'm useless at names, but he's manager of Stoke and Middlesbrough. Oh, Tony Pulis, I'm talking about, and he was, like really ahead of his time as well. And I'm not surprised that the two of them had a full career in football, because the football club mattered to them. It wasn't just the first team, which tended to happen with a lot of managers who would say, listen, I've got enough on my bloody plate here with this shambles. I said, I don't want to be concerned about, what the youth team are doing. And then they'd put me over to the youth team coach, who was generally less experienced, but yeah, he was a top man, top manager.
I mean, within the article he's talking, and he says he's got a 5-year plan to get them out of Division 2 or into Division 2. And it's like,
yeah.
He did that and more.
Yeah. Well, his team, all his teams were an exponent of the long ball. Really, it was get the ball forward as early as you can. The two front men would link up together, 4-4-2. Fullbacks would play the ball forward, a little bit like the FA at the time, which was led by Charles Hughes. He was an exponent of the Charles Hughes philosophy, if you want. And nowadays, that I don't know what the coaching qualifications involve in the present day, but I would be amazed if it was anything like direct football. What I see on the television now is a compact game, playing the ball into midfield, slower build up, more possession of the ball, but in his day that worked for his team, so all praise to him for that.
Just on the Ask the Expert questions, Tom, the one that caught my eye was the one Borough, and it's from Michael Moore in Chorley. He says, I'm a very keen Middlesbrough supporter and would like to know how long the club has been in existence. I just love the fact that back then, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't this information to hand. Somebody who followed the club, obviously he's over there, Charlie's over in Lancashire, that's near Bolton, isn't it?
Yeah.
But to have to write into a magazine and ask when the club was formed, because that information just wasn't freely available, it just shows you, again, nowadays, you go into Google, you type it in, and there it is straight away, whereas you write in, hope to get a response, and then hope that you don't miss it in the magazine.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, I meet people now, and they sort of quite surprised when I say I used to play professional football. Straight away, they're on Google, Paul Power, and there's a picture of me in City kit or whatever. You've got instant access now to all sorts.
Yeah, they could probably tell you your career back in about half an hour.
Yeah, usually do.
So on the page opposite there, we've got an advert for Simlam football boots. I have to say, I have no recollection of Simlam football boots. Did you have a boot deal when you were playing, Paul?
I did, yeah, but it wasn't worth a fortune. I wasn't an international player. I actually got one England B cap when we played against Spain. We got beat 3-1, so that was the end of my England B career straight away. But no, I used to wear Adidas boots, always black boots. I never wore, the coloured boots weren't sort of prevalent then, but the clubs would generally say you wear black boots. If Tony Buck was manager of Manchester City, he wouldn't have had any Alan Ball white boots on the football pitch, unless they paid a lot of money for a player. If Trevor Francis wanted to wear orange boots, then he'd have been able to do what he wanted. So, but as local players, myself, Kenny Clements, Jed Keegan, Gary Owen, Ray Ransom, people like that, the club would provide the boots, and then you wore them. And then I used to get about 300 quid a year for wearing the boots. And then if we got to an FA Cup final, then obviously there was always a bonus. But what impressed me more was just because I wore Adidas boots, I could go down to the Adidas factory at Stockport, and they had what we called Santa's Grotto, and it had all the up-to-date stuff. And at the end of the season, I could go and choose all T-shirts and tracksuits and stuff for my holidays. So that was worth more than the 300 quid I used to get for wearing the boots, like, you know.
I tell you, there's collectors of that sort of stuff that would be frothing at the mouth at the prospect of that these days.
Yeah.
So with the boots, I'm guessing how many pairs would you get a season? Would you wear new ones for a cup final, or would you be a case of wearing ones that you'd worn in before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd never wear a pair of new boots. We used to have apprentices at the club who cleaned, they'd clean certain number of players' boots. So they'd say there were eight or nine apprentices. They'd be responsible for maybe 5 or 6 pairs of boots of the pros and the reserves. They had to make sure that everything was sparkling, ready for the game. And what we used to do was ask as long as he was the same shoe size or almost the same shoe size. I remember do you remember Earl Barrett?
Mm-hmm.
Earl Barrett used to play, he started off at City and then I think he went to Aston Villa. Earl was my apprentice, if you like, and he would wear the boots in his training sessions, and sort of wear them in for me so they were a little bit softer when I got. I don't know whether that happens now, but it always did. Apprentices weren't even allowed in the first team dressing room when I was a pro, because they had to knock on the door before they were allowed in. So the first team ruled the roost downstairs, sort of thing.
So we go over the page then, Andy Bink Shooter, previewing the season, and they say our title favourites: Liverpool, Man City, Nottingham Forest, and Everton. And just have a wee look then at what Shoot said about Manchester City. They've promised so much in the past 2 or 3 seasons, and as we spoke about earlier on, so City were runners-up in 77 and 4th in 78, yet for one reason or another have failed to land the title. Tony Book has been spending even more money this summer, and City do indeed have a powerful-looking squad, strong in all 3 departments. They have youth, experience, depth and skill. We tipped City last year, and a lot of people will make City their choice this season.
Yeah, it didn't quite turn out that way, did it?
City finished 15th that season, 78-79, and Liverpool won the league in 68 points, 8 ahead of Nottingham Forest.
Yeah. It was disappointing having done ever so well, when we finished runners up to Liverpool and then 4th that season. I think everybody was expecting for us to take it on and to improve, but it didn't work out that way. And I don't know why, because the players that we had internationals certainly down the spine of the team. We had Joe Corrigan in goal, and then Dave Watson, the old Dave Watson, if you like.
You played with both of them, didn't you? Both Dave Watsons.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Both tremendous players as well. If I believe what I am to believe, reading the Daily Mail at the moment, and all about head injuries and Alzheimer's disease for players, then those 2 Dave Watsons are bound to have it, I've got to say, because they used to love heading the ball. The Dave Watson at Everton, at the end of we used to have a light training session on a Friday, but Dave would go and head about 20 balls just to get the timing right for the day after, the day of the game. And although the balls were lighter then than when Jeff Astle, for instance, was heading them, they were, it was still sort of launching balls from 40 and 50 yards away to head them as far away as you could. So, I'm not surprised there are problems with my generation, and certainly the generation before. So Billy McNeil, I know he suffered with dementia, and I'm not at all surprised, because the ball at the end of the game, he might have weighed the same at the beginning of the game, because I think the stipulation is it's got to weigh about 14 ounces or something. But in the old days, at the end of the game, it didn't weigh 14 ounces. It weighed about 14 pound, I reckon.
And just, you mentioned Billy McNeil there. Obviously, you worked with Billy at Manchester City. I think it was Billy who was the manager when you left City. Is that right?
He was, but I was there for about probably 4 seasons. In fact, we just got relegated. If you remember the Luton game when David Pleat was dancing across the pitch. Yeah. So we got relegated, and then Billy McNeil came in the close season.
Right.
We got promoted straight away, although we didn't finish directly in the promotion places. But we managed to get promotion straight away, and then he was you could see that he'd worked under Jock Stein, and I think he was a typical. His attitude towards players was that, like Jock Stein. It was, the club was most important. You do as I say. He was very much like a Sir Matt Busby, or a typical Scottish manager, you might say, although, that's being a bit racist. But at the time, that's how he was, and if he wasn't happy with you, he'd definitely let you know.
Just while we're talking about Jock Stein there, so that they talk about Leeds United, and at this point it says their managerial problems can't have helped preparations for the new season. So I think the week before this magazine came out, or probably actually when the magazine came out, that's when Jock Stein was appointed as manager of Leeds, which I think 40 days, another
44 days. It was coincidentally the exact same length of time Brian Clough was at Leeds United.
Yeah.
For the Scotland job came up.
Yeah. I mean, it's sliding doors, isn't it? Just if that Scotland job hadn't come up, you can only guess what Jock Stein might have done with a team down in the English League, Leeds United.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't know whether there was because they'd had so much success, Leeds, as a group of players, and some of them at that stage were coming towards the end of their careers. Maybe Paul Madeley and Billy Bremner and Norman Hunter, but they possibly weren't able to accept the fact that was, and they wouldn't accept change. They'd achieved so much together. I think when somebody came in who was a bit of a foreigner, they made it difficult for him. And of course, they'd have the support of the supporters. They'd have the backing of the supporters, I should say. So it was always likely to be a difficult job for any new manager to take over that group of players, I would imagine. That's just my feeling, by the way. I don't know.
All right, so it shoots verdicts on who was going to win the title there. Again, they say Everton, Liverpool, Man City, Forest and possibly Arsenal are the contenders, but ultimately they plump for Liverpool as their title winners, and of course Liverpool did go on to win the title that season. So anything else we want to say there about some of the teams or some of the players on those pages there?
Well, it's always interesting to talk about the Liverpool team. They were the top dogs. I mean, Russian Dalglish. I just mentioned that we had a solid spine of the team, an international spine. Well, so did they. Yeah. They had Ray Clements in goal, who kept Joe Corrigan out of the international team for quite a long time. They had Graham Souness in the middle of the park, who, could make things happen, and he could stop things happening as well. From my point of view, playing wide on the left, Jimmy Case was one of the most difficult opponents that I ever played against. Not, he's just physically a hard man, And I knew that if the ball was in the air between the two of us, that I was going to get an arm or an elbow or something just to remind me that I was playing against him. Like, and then if I managed to get past him, then it, like in the early days, it would be Tommy Smith that you had to deal with, and then after him, Phil Neal, like, you know, who was no angel himself, by the way. So, and an England international fullback for years. So they had strength all over the park, and you know, the likes of Ray Kennedy, and they had players that were contributing goals from all over the place. I remember you might even talk about Paul Futcher, who we bought from Luton. Futcher was a little bit like John Stones now. You know, he was a footballing centre half, pinged a great ball out wide to the wide players, good enough in the air, you know, but he fancied himself on the ball too much. And when he come up against somebody like Kenny Dalglish and Ian Rush, they would just turn away when the goalkeeper gave him the ball, or the fullback had given him the ball. They'd sort of turn away as if they were not interested, let him have a touch, and then they'd be straight in on him. And the number of times he'd get dispossessed, which is, you know, you could imagine Liverpool doing their homework and saying to those two before the game, you know, this is, you can take advantage of somebody's overconfidence here on the ball, you know. And then you soon learn from your mistakes. Paul Futch was a good player, but a better player when he'd been playing in the Premiership, like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, Tom, what you said there about Liverpool, because we had David Fairclough on one of the previous podcasts, and there was an article with Kevin Keegan, and he was talking about exactly that thing, where they would pick out the weaknesses in the opponents and basically, you know, go for the throat on them, you know, put pressure on them if they weren't comfortable on the ball and things like that. So that definitely went on with Liverpool at the time. Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I played for Man City for about 13 years. When I went to Everton, I was in the Everton team that played against Manchester City at Main Road. And before the game, Graham Sharp said to Adrian Heath, he said, "You know what happens here, don't you?" So straight away, I'm thinking, well, I was there for like 10 years, and I'm interested to know what you're going to say. So Sharpie said, "I'll just take Mick McCarthy out of the way, and you just get in the hole." You know, and I'm thinking, I never knew teams thought that about Man City. You know, but yeah, absolutely. When players work each other out, and the the longer they play against each other, they'll sort of understand everybody's weaknesses, basically. So it's quite interesting to see when you go into a different dressing room what they think of the team you used to play for, like, you know.
And was that how you get your goal that day for Everton against Manchester City? Because Graham Sharp had pulled Mick McCarthy out there.
No, I think it was because if I'd have been in goal, I'd have saved my shot. But Perry Suckling I think it was Perry Suckling who was in goal. I might be wrong, but the goalkeeper should have done better, you know. But you know, it was just one of those things, because City was struggling that year, and of course Everton were going for the championship, which we did eventually win that year, and I couldn't celebrate scoring against Man City at Main Road, like, you know. It just wasn't the done thing.
And did Howard Kendall pull you up about that in the dressing room afterwards?
No. I think he would have understood, like, you know, because a lot of those lads that played for Man City that day, Kenny Clements, my best mate in football, we roomed together for God knows how many years at City. Neil McNabb, a tremendous friend and player, you know, people like Andy May and others that had come up through the ranks while I was playing at City. I didn't want to sort of run around and rub their nose in it, sort of thing, because they were still friends. You know what I mean? So, and Howard would have understood that, because he just was a great manager who understood people. Yeah.
All right, so we're looking there. There's a how they finished in 1977-78, where I shoot list or the league tables, and the ups and downs of who was promoted, who was relegated, etc. I don't know if there's anything to pick out there, Andy. Have you seen anything from that wee list?
Just Tom and I are both Clydebank supporters, and if you look at the Scottish Premier Division, we finished rock bottom.
Yep.
That one, so we got relegated that season. But listen, for a team like Clydebank, even to be in the Premier League was, that was getting there and being there for the season. We did it a few.
Yeah.
Was more than enough.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned, I think Neil McNabb played for Morton originally, and then Gordon Smith, Derek Parlane. We had a lad called Dalziel.
Gordon Dale.
Gordon Dale, yeah. Jim Tolmie. Lots of good Scottish players when Billy McNeil took over at Man City, because obviously he knew the Scottish scene, and he had Gordon Smith and Derek Parlane who came down, who were Rangers people, and Billy McNeil was the biggest blinking Catholic you could ever imagine. He used to say to me when he was in charge of Celtic, if there were two 14-year-olds and one was a Catholic and one was a Protestant, he signed the Protestant because he knew that Rangers wouldn't sign the Catholic, so all that sort of thing. We just didn't understand that, south of the border, the sort of things that went on. And the Scottish lads used to take advantage of it, and they were Mickey takers a little bit. So, they'd start teaching us the words of the sash, so we'd be on the coach going to the game, and for it was old and it was beauty. And Billy McNeil's at the bottom. I'm a Catholic, and he'd come steaming down. And Mick McCarthy, who's a Catholic as well. We're joining this, what we thought was a Scottish folk song, And then Billy McNeil had come steaming down the bus and give us a bollocking for joining in. And then I'd look at Gordon Smith, and he'd be sort of having a little chuckle in the background, But it was all good fun. And I know Paul Gascoigne, when he went, but somebody had put him up to playing the flute, and it's just you understand a lot more now than you did in the time.
As you say, if you don't know about these things, then if somebody tells you to do something or asks you to do something, you're not always going to do it without questioning, but quite often you are. So you can't really be held to account for that, I don't think.
No, and politics and football really don't mix, but on occasion you get caught out because you've been a little bit politically naive. I mean, in 1981, I 80-81, when we got to the FA Cup final with Man City against Spurs, I was voted Player of the Year, the Belfast Player of the Year. And the Saturday before I went over to Belfast, I was actually presented by the Sun newspaper a cheque for £1,000 to give to a charity of my choice. In 1981, after the cup final, I was due to get married. So the priest who was going to marry me was a City fan, but he was also quite high up with CAFOD, like Catholic Overseas Development. And so I presented this cheque to this Catholic priest. Oh my God, when I went to receive the Player of the Year award in Belfast, I was like, half the room were pleased with me and the other half were giving me symbols to wear, like the red hand of Ulster, put it in my lapel, didn't know what it meant or anything. Then someone else come up, what are you doing wearing that in your lapel? And I just didn't have a clue. They took me to the cleaners, I've got to say. Good fun.
But I guess again, looking at the Premier League, Celtic's finished there, 5th in the table, 36 points. Rangers and Aberdeen, Dundee United and Hibs all above them. And I guess that was Billy McNeil's last season as well before he moved to. Was that, or was it? Yeah.
It would have been. It might have been. Although no, we didn't get relegated. He came the season that City got relegated, which might have been the year after.
Right.
But he was definitely there round about late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Because that's when we were in the old second division.
Right.
And then John Bond came round about 1980.
Right.
Billy McNeil was there a couple of years, and then he went to Aston Villa after he left City. And both City and Aston Villa went down that year,
Same season.
as I remember. But it wouldn't be down to him.
Yeah, I think I just lost my bearings there, because obviously Jock Stein would have been the manager, and then he went to Leeds and then to Scotland. So I think, would Billy McNeil have been Aberdeen manager at that point?
Yeah, he might have been my Aberdeen manager then.
Yeah, he did. I'm sure. No. Did he go to Celtic after Aberdeen?
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure he was Celtic manager. At the time. So, if judging by the table there, if they were struggling, they might have thought, there's a need for a change. But he was an absolute god around Celtic Park. He was. Even the Rangers lads in the team, the Derek Parlanes and Gordon Smith and that, they were, they used to call it. They used to refer to him as Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
He was, because his chest was out, and he was a big, powerful, opinionated man, So he would have been difficult for him to leave Celtic, I think.
I think it's fair to say Billy McNeil was one of these players that crosses the divide and crosses all team. Supporters respect him.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
All right, we turn the page then and look at the letters page. So goal lines is the letters page, and just something that we touched on earlier on, Paul, there. So that first letter, the star letter from Brian McGovern of Dublin. Why the fuss? What's all the fuss about players from Argentina in the English League? For many years, English clubs have signed countless players from Scotland, Wales and Ireland with no limit in the number. There hasn't been a murmur from the English authorities. When Arsenal played last season, there were 7 non-English players in the team at times. So when a limit of 2 is put on continental players, and considering the best English players make the grade whatever, I find the protest quite amazing. So like we were saying earlier on, this is the season that Tottenham have brought Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa over from Argentina. And obviously there's a wee bit of, like we were saying, people kicking up a wee bit of fuss that now foreigners are starting to creep into the English game. But
yeah. Well, like I said, Ipswich had Frans Thijssen and Arno Mjoren from Holland. Then later, when Malcolm Allison took over at Man City, he brought Kazu Dana, who was an unbelievably talented player, but wouldn't get in any team at the moment because he's just not prepared to work hard. I think Kazi, when Kazi came to City, he was probably about 32 at the end of his career. Still a magnificent player. I was playing at fullback then when Kazi played in front of me as a central midfield player, and he used to come and show for the ball, and then I wouldn't give it him because he'd be tightly marked. So I'd drop it into the front man, and then Kazi was expected to turn round and go and support the long ball to the front man, and of course that wasn't his. He wanted the ball to his feet. And he just said to me after one game, "Hey, I come for the ball, you give me the ball." He said, "If there's a man on my left, you give the ball to my right. If there's a man on my right, give it to my left. If there's a man marking me tight, give it me hard and I'll give it you back. If there's nobody behind me, give it me soft and I'll turn." And I'm thinking, that was a coaching lesson for me in one sentence, from a massively experienced continental player. No coach had ever sort of said that to me, how you should give the ball to players that are receiving it, So he'd have probably got frustrated by having ordinary players around him. And I think a lot of these foreign players brought a lot to the English game, a lot of the understanding of different positions. They were definitely, we had a player called Dragislav Stabanovic at Man City. We call him Stepi, a Yugoslav. Went on to be manager of Bayer Leverkusen in Germany. And I'm not surprised because he was a total professional player. You know, he would have been steeped in football and he learned English. He came over. I went round to his house. He lived in a borough of Manchester called Sale. He had the English newspapers pinned on a board in his kitchen, and words underlined that he didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd get the dictionary out and he'd learn. Kazu Dana came. He was 32. He wasn't going to learn English. In fact, I roomed with him, and I ended up speaking more Polish than he spoke English in the end. You know, but that's the difference between the two types. Kazu didn't go on. He should have, with his experience as a player, he should have gone into management, but he never did. And he ended up tragically losing his life in a car accident in America. Yeah. But yeah, you come across all different types of characters, personalities, you know, when you've been involved in the game sort of a long time.
So there's a nice little letter there about Ray Clements. Obviously, Ray Clements has just passed away recently, but Christopher McAvoy of Gorey writes, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Ray Clements for all the warmth and kindness he showed on his recent holiday in Southern Ireland. He signed literally hundreds of autographs and even took time off to visit the local football team. Considering he was on holiday, I feel he was remarkably kind to work so hard.
Absolutely. I mean, we used to, at City, they used, on a Friday after training, they used to have like 3 tables full of memorabilia that supporters had sent in, whether it was a football, a birthday card, whatever. And we'd work down from one end of the table, and everybody, the whole squad, were expected to sign. Mm-hmm. You know, now I think players will only do it if they get paid a certain amount of money. You know what I mean? So, but players were revered in our day, much the same as they are now. But I think because in those days it was a working class game, it's not anymore. You know, with the introduction of all sorts of executive boxes and everything, you know, it's not a working class game particularly anymore. But, you know, in days gone by it was. And I think the players that were playing were from working class backgrounds and understood what it meant to supporters, you know, to receive an autograph, because they'd probably been in a similar situation when they were younger as well. So, But there would still be 1 or 2 senior pros that were a little bit aloof. You know, that if somebody came up to them and asked them for an autograph, they'd say, "Excuse me, I'm out with my teammates and I don't want to be disturbed. I won't sign that." You know, but the good ones would always sign it. It wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, this is something we've touched on quite a few times, Tom, isn't it? You see professionals nowadays with their headphones walking past a group of young lads wanting an autograph or something, and they just ignore them, and you think that's not right. And the thing I always come back to is it can make or break good or great memories or bad memories of a player. As you say, if somebody turns around and says, "Can you sign this?" and they say, "No, beat it," or "I don't have time," then that's a memory for life for that person, just for that 2 or 3 seconds to actually do the autograph. Whereas if they take the time out, say, "Okay, who's it to?" Or there you go, son. That's a memory, a good memory. It's been made for life. And you know, I think I get that not everybody's always going to be in the frame of mind to do the right, you know, to do it right.
Yeah. Perhaps if you've lost and you've not played particularly well, you might be a bit down. And
yeah,
but that's no excuse either, you know, because you can make somebody's day by just you know, acting respectfully, really. Yeah.
I think even if you're in a bad mood, if somebody wants an autograph, even if you just take it off, don't say anything, sign it, that's still made their day, you know.
Yeah.
Everything else.
I've got a story for it. I don't know, do you remember Fred Eyre? Fred Eyre actually is a bit, you know, he does a lot on radio, but he was manager of Stockport County. He also started his career at Manchester City, had a good career in football. And he's written a couple of books where one was called A Breath of Fred Eyre. And he's got a son called Stephen. And his son wrote to me when I was playing for Man City, because he was a City fan. And the teacher at the school had said, I want you to write to your hero and see if you get a reply. So he'd written to me as captain of Manchester City, and I wrote back saying, "Dear Stephen, great to hear from you, blah, blah, blah," signed it at the bottom. Then I was reading the Daily Express on the Saturday, and Fred Eyre puts a little thing in it. He said, "I'd just like to say thanks to Paul Power, you made my son's day." Well, about 15, 20 years later, I actually worked with Stephen Eyre, who was a coach at Manchester City's academy. And when we went on the Christmas party, he brought the letter. Unbelievable. So, what it means to certain people. And as he was 35 then, 36 maybe, but he'd still kept that letter. He didn't tell me actually that most of them wrote to Spider-Man. So they never got a reply, but there you go. He made the right choice, maybe.
So the other wee bit there, so right opposite that, we've got Ray Clements' column. Ray Clements talking soccer. And again, Ray's previewing the season ahead. And he says, "I rate Manchester City's challenge more highly than Nottingham Forest. And the Main Road side had a disappointing season last time out, only finishing fourth. But they have so much talent. And with the signing of Paul Futcher from Luton, City must be in with a fine chance." And he goes on to mention Dave Watson and Mick Shannon as two of Man City's main men that season.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they were all international players, so I don't think Futch ever got an international cap. I might be wrong. He'd have probably got maybe under 21s and younger age groups. But he's another one who's unfortunately no longer with us. But he was a good footballing centre half, and like I say, pinged fantastic balls out to wide players. So Dennis Stewart, Peter Barnes, would be receiving these passes while they're in plenty of space. Yeah, we just didn't really hit it off up front. I mean, we had I don't know whether Mick Shannon would have been with us that season. I can't quite remember, but I think it was Mick Shannon and Brian Kidd who were the striking partnership. Mick was a great player and could run away. He was a little bit like the lad at Leicester now, Vardy. He'd run away from people because he was long striding and quick. But he just didn't, for one reason or another, whether he was lacking confidence because he wasn't scoring lots of goals. When he got through one-on-one with the keeper, he didn't always convert. Whereas I played with Trevor Francis, and if you put him through and he was one-on-one with the keeper, you would bet like 9 times out of 10 he would score, because that's just the sort of player he was. He knew exactly what he was going to do. They used to say about me, because I made runs from deep and I'd get in the box, but then they used to call me Jigsaw because I fell to pieces in the box, but there you go. And but yeah, so I think we probably missed out. We had Asa Hartford and Gary Owen in the middle of the park, who weren't great goal scorers, not abundant goal scorers anyway. Dennis Stewart got probably more than the strikers playing wide on the right. Kiddo always came up with the goods, So but Mick struggled a little bit that season, and I think that's possibly why we didn't do as well as we thought we would.
What was your thoughts on the goalkeeping situation for England at the time? So Clemens, Shelton, Corrigan, and Phil Parkes as well thrown in there.
Yeah, but it's always been a strong position, hasn't it, for England teams? I mean, even when Gordon Banks was, you couldn't imagine Gordon Banks ever being ousted from that position, and there were great goalkeepers who had to play second fiddle to him for years, and it was pretty much the same. It was pretty much the same with Joe Corrigan, because he had Shilton and Clements who would always get in before him, But Joe was a top goalkeeper. He struggled a little bit early on in his career because he was prone to carry a little bit of weight. But when he actually broke his jaw in training, it was Mike Doyle who a freak accident, and he broke Joe's jaw in training. and he had to have his jaws wired up, Joe, and so he was on liquids, and the weight just fell off him, and after that he never looked back, like, you know. So Doyley did him a favour there, I suppose. And Mike Doyle's another one who's no longer with us. So we keep mentioning these players, you know, that have been great servants to the game and passed away far too early.
Absolutely.
Andy, will I throw it over to you?
Yeah. So what we'll do at the moment, Paul, is we'll jump out the magazine and we're going to do, I think you've done a few of these recently, but we're going to do a focus on. So I'm just going to fire some questions at you. We're not going to compare them to any previous answers, so just give me your answers as they are now. Full name?
Paul Christopher Power.
Okay. Birthplace?
But my birthplace was Openshaw in Manchester, but I spent most of my childhood in Wythenshawe, Manchester, which is the other side of the city.
What was your first car?
My first car I bought off Mike Doyle. It was a Morris 1300, and it spent more time in his garage than it did on the road.
Brilliant. Who's your favourite player?
My favourite player of all time was Colin Bell, but Neil Young played in the same team as Colin Bell, and he was a left winger. I was a left winger. I absolutely love Neil Young. Yeah.
Okay. What's your most memorable match?
Oh, it'd have to be either the quarter-final of the FA Cup in 1981 against Everton, the replay at Main Road, or the semi-final against Ipswich at Villa Park. So either of those, but I scored in both of them, and we ended up getting to the cup final that year.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll touch on that after these questions, Tom.
Yeah.
You reckon? Yeah. What's been the biggest thrill of your life?
Probably being at the birth of my first child. You know, it was unbelievable. I was out with Julie's dad, and we got a phone call that, you know, the birth was imminent. I walked into the delivery room, and the baby was almost sort of being delivered as I got there. So I missed all the gory hard work bits. So the best.
It looks pretty easy, actually. So,
no problem.
Never say that, though. Never say that. What's been the biggest disappointment?
Biggest disappointment was being relegated at Man City. You know, I just made reference to the David Pleat game against Luton Town when we'd pulled ourselves up by the socks. Really, we'd won. I think it was either Brighton or Portsmouth or somewhere on the south coast, and we'd got ourselves in a situation where we only needed to draw the last game of the season. And it was at home to Luton, who was struggling as well. So we fancied our chances, but unfortunately we got beat 1-0 that game. And the atmosphere around the dressing room and Main Road was absolute disconsolation, you know. Okay.
What's the best country that you've visited?
Well, I live in France now, and we always, you know, like I said, we had a motorhome for years, and we used to drive to France during the holiday periods, like, you know. So we'd have like a month in France. Always loved the Côte d'Azur, but could never afford to live there. So we now live in a place called the Languedoc, which is a little bit cheaper, you know, but the sun shines just as brightly in the Languedoc. Although not at the moment, I've got to say, I'm stuck in Manchester right now. But really, my favourite was, it's possibly America. San Francisco was absolutely fantastic, but we went to Rio in Brazil, and that was unbelievable. You know, I think that was my favourite city in the world.
Was that through football, or was that with the family?
No, that was with the family after I was working at City's Academy, so I'd retired from playing.
Excellent. What's your favourite food?
I've got very simple tastes in food, but it would be a meat, so it might be lamb, or it might be cottage pie, but you know, something with plenty of gravy. Really, that's me.
Brilliant. Miscellaneous likes. So just give us 2 things that you like doing.
Well, I I actually quite like reading now. In fact, you'll be quite impressed. I don't know whether you can see that.
Yeah, big one.
Yeah. So I'm reading that at the moment, but that's quite funny. And I met him once after a game at Man City, but he we're just talking about people that will sign an autograph or stand and have a chat with you. He was in a concert at Manchester, and we'd had a game, and we ended up at the same club in Manchester. And he came and spoke to my cousin, who, my cousin said he'd listened to all his records, and he said, "I don't know what a chukta is." "What's a chukta?" So I said, "Well, go and ask him." And he went, no, I can't go and ask. Anyway, he went and asked him, and he was away for about 45 minutes talking to Billy Connolly. He was absolutely made up, so that's an example of a bloke who goes the extra mile a little bit, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you my Billy Connolly story, which I think you know, Tom. So the house, I'm from a place in Glasgow called Drumchapel. I live down near Leeds now, Dewsbury, Leeds way. But so the house I lived in for the first 12 years of my life, before it, Billy Connolly lived in the very same house. It was a tenement. So he lived in there directly before we moved in. But
right.
I think it's a South Bank show, and I think you can get it on YouTube. And I don't remember this happening, but my family talked about it, and eventually I saw the video. But Billy Connolly goes back to the house. We'd moved out by then, and so did the other people after us, and it'd been boarded up. But on the front door, there was a big metal door, but the letterbox was still open. And so he went up and he couldn't get in, so he opened it up and looked, and he went, "Looks as though they still haven't changed the wallpaper."
Wallpaper.
Apparently my dad was gone mental with them about that, So that's my Billy Connolly story, that I lived in the same house as him after him. So there we go.
All right, nice one.
Yeah. So what's another thing you like doing?
I like walking my dog. So, lots of opportunity to do that in France. You can either, I live about sort of 20 minutes from Narbonne Plage or Guisson Plage. So I can take the dog along there, not in season because, dogs are not allowed on the beach in the summer, but and also down the Canal du Midi, there are lots of lovely walks down there. Just walking through the vines. I just enjoy getting out and walking him every day. Like, he's 11 now, so he doesn't tend to clear off quite so far as he used to do, and he don't walk as fast, so that suits me now.
It's like I'll have a good walk myself. I was out for a 2-hour walk before this podcast, so that's how much I like it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, miscellaneous dislikes. So give me a couple of things that drive you up the wall.
Well, I don't like bad manners. Good manners cost nothing, and to say please and thank you, is not a great difficulty. So I don't like rudeness or bad manners.
Yeah.
I don't like lateness. If I arrange to meet somebody, then I like to be on time, and I like them to be on time. So just those two things. But not much upsets me, I've got to say. I'm quite easygoing.
I have to say, I absolutely agree with both of those. The second one in particular, I think that I always probably end up getting to places really early just to make sure that I'm not late.
Yeah. In fact, that's probably why I don't like Jimmy Case, because he was always late for the ball. Always late for the ball.
Yeah. Okay, what's your favourite TV show?
I quite like travel shows now, and cookery. Related to cookery. So, the three chefs,
right,
when they were travelling around France and Italy, and Gino Di Campo and the other, your Scottish mate, Gordon Ramsay, yeah, and Fred, the French, I quite enjoy them. I don't cook, but I can appreciate the preparation that goes into certain foods, and it's always interested me.
Okay, what about a couple of favourite singers?
Nobody of the present era, because I'm not sort of a modern music. But when I was sort of a young pro, you know, I used to love Paul Simon, Carly Simon, that sort of country rock type music. Yeah, so I'd still say even now, you know, if I'm listening to the radio and a Paul Simon or a Carly Simon record comes on, it certainly catch my attention. My missus keeps me up to date with the more modern stuff, like, you know, and she's 62, but she still listens to all that stuff.
Yeah. So, what about a couple of favourite actors?
Again, present day, I wouldn't really go mad, but Robert De Niro, from all the Godfather era, you know, sort of those, maybe Leonardo DiCaprio a little bit perhaps, but yeah, they'd all be from maybe 20 years ago.
Okay. Who's been the biggest influence on you, whether it's personally or in your career?
I would say, if I was going to write a book on my 5 best managers, then Howard Kendall would be right up there. But I think Gordon Taylor from the PFA, because I worked for the PFA after I finished coaching at Everton. So I worked for the PFA for about 10 or 12 years, and Gordon Taylor is vilified now because of all the Alzheimer's thing, and the PFA haven't really helped out. But you know, since he's been the head of the PFA, and they've had an accident fund, so if anything happens to me and I need hip replacements, knee replacements, I go to the PFA and I'd get some help with that financially. If I went to City or Everton, who I played for, I wouldn't. You know what I mean? So he's done an awful lot for players, like non-contributory pension schemes. You know, all players are in a pension scheme. When they finish playing, you know, they get a financial remuneration because of that. They won't get anything like that from the clubs that they played for. You know, or the FA, who's in charge of the game. So, you know, he's done an awful lot for football generally and for footballers. So, you know, I would say he is the person who has influenced me more than anybody in my life.
Good answer. Okay, last question. Which person in the world would you most like to meet?
I'd
or have you already met him? Billy Connolly, maybe?
No. I didn't understand him when I did meet him. So maybe the Pope, I think, you know, just because, maybe the Queen. You know, when we got to Wembley in '81, the Queen Mother was the member of the royal family who I had to introduce to the players. But I'd like to meet the Queen and maybe go to Bookhouse and that. But the Pope would be, you know, so because I'm a Catholic and he's the head of the church and everything. I'm not a practicing Catholic, by the way, but he would be. I'd be in awe of somebody like that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. I'll hand Tom. You any?
Yeah, well, I was going to just a couple of wee things about your career. I was going to ask Paul. So in this season, 78-79, Manchester City went on a wee European run, and you had 2 games against AC Milan. So and out in the San Siro, I think the game was postponed due to fog, and you played the match the following lunchtime, and you scored a terrific goal. I wonder if what you can remember about that.
Yeah, I remember it well, actually. I didn't score that many goals, so the ones I did score, I remember. But you're dead right. We went out on the pitch on the Wednesday night, and the fog was sort of covering. It wasn't on the ground, but it was covering the stand, and you could hear the noise of the home crowd, and firecrackers and bangers and everything going off. It was quite intimidating, to be fair. Anyway, then the fog fell to ground level, so the referee called the game off, and we played it the next day. So, and the stadium wasn't full. I'm pretty sure the stadium wasn't full the next day because a lot of the people would have been at work. You know, it was a Thursday afternoon, but there was still a bit of an intimidating atmosphere, but not as great as it was the night before. So that worked in our favour a little bit. I think Brian Kidd scored on the night as well. But I actually won the ball in front at the edge of our own box and just carried on running with it. And typical Italian defenders, they all just dropped off till the edge of the box. Yeah. And it was Baresi who was their left back. Although he was only about 17 at the time. I didn't even know about that until sort of after I'd finished my career. I didn't know it was Baresi, and I just came inside onto my left foot, and I shot, and it was I think it was the goalkeeper was Albertozzi. Would that be right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he should have saved it. It was another Perry Suckling one, really. He should have saved it, but then he didn't. It went in. Later on in his career, he was actually sort of prosecuted or sort of blamed for accepting bribes. So I think someone had bribed him that night as well, and he let quite a simple shot in. But great result. We ended up drawing 2-2, and then we beat them back at Main Road 3-1. I think it was. But they had a centre forward who went on to be president of the club. I'm terrible with names now, but Ken Barnes, who was Peter Barnes' dad, and worked at Man City, he said to me, "I'll be astounded if he plays tonight." And everybody was a little bit concerned about this great Italian goal scorer, Anyway, he's dead right. He didn't play, so we ended up winning the game 3-1, and we went through. I think we played Borussia Mönchengladbach in the next round.
Yeah.
And they had Bertie Vogtson, a great Danish inside forward.
Alan Simonsen, was it?
Alan Simonsen, you're dead right, yeah. And they had a really good team. And in the end, we drew at Main Road, I think, and we got beat 3-1 at their place. So that was the end of the run. But that was quarter final, I think we got through to then. But we had a good team. I think that was about the time that Malcolm Allison came to the club as well, and Mal just loved athletes, and he loved young athletes. So Nicky Reed and Tommy Caton and Ray Ranson got in the team ahead of Tommy Booth, Dave Watson. Kaz Udena didn't play. Kiddo was on the bench, I think. So he came and changed the side round sort of unbelievably. And I think that was possibly a mistake, to make so many changes from so many established players. But anyway, not to say that we would have beat them anyway, because they were a good outfit. But I can't remember who went on to win the tournament that season. It might have been Borussia Mönchengladbach. I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
Right. Other thing I was going to ask you about, Paul, what we touched on earlier on was the 81 Cup final. So for me, that was the replay was the first Cup final I saw live on television. Because obviously in Scotland, the Scottish Cup final and the FA Cup final happened simultaneously, and you always hoped the FA Cup final would go to a replay because you would get the replay live. So that was the first FA Cup final I sat down and watched, and obviously it's been down as a classic. But just obviously the Saturday, there was the 1-1 draw on the Saturday. First of all, I just wanted to ask you, what's it like leading your club out to the FA Cup final at Wembley in front of 100,000 people?
Oh, it's unbelievable because you go out on the pitch sort of an hour before the kick-off. You know where all your family, where you've got tickets for them in the stadium. So my wife's brother was a big Man United fan, and he before the Ipswich game, which we weren't expected to win. The Ipswich were the top side at the time, and he said to me, "If you beat Ipswich in the semis, I'll wear all blue at the final, So we went out on the pitch before the game, and I looked up in the stand where the family were, and sure enough, Billy was there with a big blue and white flag, blue shirt, blue jumper, blue trousers, and then he put his foot up on the hoardings, and he had red socks on, and he went, I couldn't do it. But you know that's great. You know, family can have a bit of a laugh and everything. But yeah, the whole lead up to the cup final. You know, things like we went on A Question of Sport, Manchester City against Spurs on A Question of Sport, and you know there were loads of things that were happening leading up to the cup final, because generally the football season's finished by then.
Yeah.
And it's just a fantastic occasion when driving up Wembley Way and all the City fans are, you know, they've got the flags out, and it's just a tremendous occasion, yeah. And to lead the team out, you know, having supported them as a kid, was a sort of a dream come true, really. In fact, I might have even mentioned that where you said, you know, I'll forget Julian having the baby. I'll lead his City out at Wembley. It would have been better to lift the trophy, I've got to say, but as Peter Swale said at the dinner, better to have been there and lost than not to have been there at all. And I believe that as well.
So in that game, Tommy Hutchinson scored a cracking diving header, and then he scores the own goal. Ball spins off his shoulder and flies into the net.
You know, the story to that is we knew Glenn Hoddle was always a problem from free kicks just outside the box. So we got big people in the wall, and then Tommy was at the side of the wall, and then he actually said in the training sessions leading up to the final, if I drop behind the wall, and then if he hits the bar or the post, I'll be first to get the rebound, like, you know. Joe Corrigan said, look, leave it, stay where you are, cover that, you know, the far side of the goal. He said, if Glenn Hoddle can get the ball up and over the wall and into the top corner, and I can't save it, then full marks to him, like, you know, but stay where you are. Anyway, Tommy decided, like, that he was right, and he dropped behind the wall, and that's when it hit him on the shoulder. And of course, Joe had committed himself to the first strike, and then when it deflected in the other side of the goal, he couldn't do anything about it. And Tommy looked at Joe and just looked at the floor. You know, he knew that he shouldn't have done what he did, but you know, it's all part and parcel of the game. You do what you consider right at the time, and it was just unfortunate, the consequences. But in the replay, Steve McKenzie scored the best goal,
and everybody forgets it.
Wembley. Fantastic volley from the end, and nobody ever remembers it because of Ricky Villa's goal, like, you know. But yeah, that was just because we played extra time in the first game, and we finished much stronger than them. They were falling all over the place, like, you know, with the Wembley cramps and everything. We finished like we had a good young athletic side. Nicky Reid and Tommy Kent were bombing forward, and you know, we finished much stronger than they did. If that game had been gone to a conclusion, the next goal, for instance, we'd have won that. But I think the second game, we just given too much because we were more of a physical side than they were. They were a skillful side. And I think it played into their hands a little bit in the second game, even though, you know, we went 2-1 up in that game as well. Kevin Reeves scored a penalty, I think, didn't he? And then Macca's goal, and then, of course, Ricky Villa's goal, when really we should have dealt with him before he got in the box. Once he dribbled in the box, you know, people were frightened to tackle him, and he ended up, you know, slotting it past Big Joe. But yeah, disappointing that because we felt we were good enough to win the game.
There was a couple of things I noticed about watching that game again. First was Steve McKenzie's goal was, as you say, it was absolutely out of this world. It was not a strike that if you saw it nowadays, it would be getting replay after replay after replay.
Yeah.
The other thing I like to do sometimes is look at games from back then and think about how they would be refereed today, because there was some incidents. I think the Spurs keeper handled outside the box, and didn't he came out and punched it, and it was a free kick. He didn't even get booked. And then there was another bit. I think it was Jerry Gow went into a challenge with Ozzy Ardiles, and you think that could have been a straight red these days.
Yeah.
There was another one, I don't know, I can't remember who it was, maybe Tommy Caton. It was the ball hit his hand in the penalty area, but
Right.
like it was sort of, he didn't know anything about it, but you just think nowadays that would be a penalty with the rules.
Yeah. Well, it would certainly would. It certainly would have been if VAR had been around in those days, because they never give Man City any decisions, so it would have probably ended up 5-2.
Yeah.
Now, but yeah, I think some of the tackles in those days, when I look back at games now, you know, I mean, one that comes to mind is Leeds against Chelsea, and Eddie Gray got absolutely mullered by the right back at Chelsea, Chopper Harris. Like he absolutely, he'd have been sent off. There was no doubt about that. Graham Souness, who played for Liverpool, I'm sure his philosophy was get your retaliation in first, because he used to just lay into people in the first 2 or 3 minutes, because he knew that the referee wouldn't send him off then, like, you know, and you know, certain players got away with murder and sort of manipulated the rules a little bit, to be fair. But no, I think the 2 games against Spurs were worthy of the 100th cup final, which it was that year, you know. So I think they were both good games.
Yeah.
So, and if we jump back into the magazine, Andy, so if we just go have a brief wee look, pages 16 and 17, talking about why fans have to pay more to watch soccer, and it's just a wee bit about how the gate money is going up over the years. And if you look at the prices there, and obviously this article's talking about the sort of way that the money's doubled to get into a football match then, but it's really nothing compared to what it is these days to get into a game. So if you look at that, you've got, starts off at 1919, minimum admission charge raised from 6 shillings 2.5 pence to 1 shilling 5 pence, and then it goes 1955, it's 2 shillings 10 pence. Then 65, a decade later, is doubled to 4 shillings 20 pence, and 1972 is up to 40p. 75, 65 pence, 77, 80 pence, and 78. 1978 is up to £1 to get into a match. It's
yeah,
crazy.
but all affordable by anybody. You know what I mean? If you were a working class bloke, you could afford to go to a football match. I'm not sure that's the case these days.
Yeah.
I think in the article what they mention is that it's, you know, cheap compared to some of the other forms of entertainment.
Going to the theatre, for instance, it would be a lot more expensive to watch a Broadway show or something. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of players went to Italy, didn't they? Like Gary Lineker and Gazza and Graham Souness, they went over to Italy because there was more money there, you know. But I think I've got programs in my locker at home that were, when I went to watch City, they were a shilling. You know, it was a shilling for a program, and I'm probably giving my age away there, but even Wembley programs were cheap. Later on, when I got there playing for playing for Everton, it was like, you know, 10 quid for a program. You know, you don't even have to pay that to get in to watch the game during a lot of the eras, you know. Yeah. So, yeah, it is. But you see, there's so much money in football now that they don't even need to charge people to go in and watch, because the clubs make so much money from Sky TV and all the other, you know.
Yeah, and in those days, I guess the greatest income was from the fans at the time, but like you say, nowadays money's coming from all over the place for sponsorship deals, TV, etc.
See, I worked, when I was at the PFA, I worked with Jimmy Armfield, who was part of the 1966 World Cup winning squad, even though he didn't play. But he said when he played, he used to get, if the game appeared on television, which Blackpool did quite often then because they were a top team, he'd get an extra £25 in his wages, you know. Then the BBC started to invest more into football, and the PFA said, well, you know, we want 10%. I think it might have been Cliff Lloyd then, although it might have been Gordon. we want 10% of any deal because we're going to set up an accident fund and a sort of an after career development fund, you know what I mean? So like an employment fund, if you like, so that players, when they finish at 35, can retrain to do something else. So anyway, they ended up getting this 10%. Then the money went absolutely astronomical, and the club said, well, if you get 10%, you know, you'll be getting more than the blinking clubs. So Gordon cut it down to about 2% or whatever. I don't know the exact figures, but the PFA still got a considerable amount of money, to the point where I was at a meeting and Scudamore was addressing academy directors, and he said there's only three groups that are important in football, and that's the FA, the Premier League, and the Football League. And I just put my hand up and I said, don't you think there's one you've missed out there, meaning the PFA? And I might have even said the Football Managers Association as well. But he said, I know your background, Paul. He said, all I do for Gordon Taylor is write him a cheque for 26 million quid every year, you know, which is an astronomical amount of money that they pay to the Players' Union. So you can imagine how much all the clubs are getting. They really don't need to charge supporters to go in there at all. You know what I mean? And players' wages have just gone through the roof, really. You know, which I used to love Neil Young. Like I said, Neil Young at the end of his career became a milkman. I've not had to do that, and I wasn't as good a player as him. And players now, Phil Foden now, who is an outstanding player and much better player than I was, but you know, by the time he's 21, he might not even have to worry about a pension in the future, you know, because he'll be made for life. I sometimes think that some players get too much too early, you know, but that's the state of the game, and that's how much money there is around with sponsorship coming from the Middle East and everything else. It's an unbelievable lifestyle now for players. I bet there aren't many that drive a Morris 1300 as the first car.
So before we look at the Manchester City pages, could we just quickly go over the page and have a wee look at this Brian Clough? There's 2 pages on Brian Clough, controversial Clough, because obviously Forest had recently won the league title, and there's a few wee quotes there about him and from him. There's one there from Bob Stokel. He says, Clough thinks he knows it all, but really is a frightened man. He has so much success as a manager that he's afraid he won't be able to keep it up. And a wee bit from Alan Ball. Brian Clough is the sort of manager who has to dominate his players. If I ever joined him, he would have tried to dominate me. But despite his record, I would not have the respect for him to let him do it. He knows how I feel about him, and he's never made any secret of the fact he's not too struck on me either. Did you have any run-ins with Brian Clough over your career, Paul?
No, I never had a run-in with him. But when I was coaching at Everton, and I played for the reserves in a game, and one of the Forest players, he was at the reserve team game, by the way, sitting on the bench, and this incident happened right in front of the bench. The Forest player, I knocked the ball past him, and he's like leathered me, really, you know. And then I just got to put the ball down and took a quick free kick, and he walked onto the pitch, Cloughie, and he went, "Hey, son, wonderful that you could have got him booked and you got on with the game." And that was all I ever spoke to him, like, you know. Right. But I did my full badge, a coaching badge at Lilleshall, and the right back that played for Cloughie's successful side, he told us a story, you know, because after being on the field all day, we used to go in the bar at Lilleshall, have a few drinks, and he said they got through to the final of the League Cup at Forest, and none of the players had anything written in the contract about how much they get for getting to the final of the League Cup, you know. So they all had a meeting, and they went into the manager and said, "There's nothing in the contract, but this is what we want," you know. So it might have been about £2,500 or something, you know, for getting to Wembley then. And he came in on the Monday morning with 20 boxes of chocolate with a £10 note sellotaped to the top. And he said, "Here, that's your bonus for getting to the League Cup final. Now take it home to your wife and give her a nice present," like, you know. But that's how stubborn he was, you know, and he didn't care. It sounds as if he didn't care about players that much, like, you know. But But I mean, his son is having a fantastic career in management as well, Nigel, isn't he? So good to see the Clough name carrying on in. But he never came to try and buy me. So, but I would have been a walkover to him. I wouldn't have been like Bowley at all. Like, you know, I'd have taken the chocolates home to the missus. Like, I might have taken the tenner off the top though.
So if we go to page 27, then this is the pages on Manchester City club spotlight. So, well, there we go. There's your. So first of all, so 5 years of glory. So this page here is a wee bit of a look, a brief look at the history of Manchester City. And there's Billy Meredith there, and Frank Swift, and a photograph of the Man City players celebrating with the 1970 FA Cup.
Yeah, that was the team that I used to watch with Tony Buck, the skipper, and Colin Bell, and Mike Summerby, Franny Lee. Who, you know, when I started my career, I was late starting my career because I went to university to study law. So, I mean, even this Shoot magazine is in 1978. I was 23 then. No, I wasn't. I was 25, sorry, in 78. But I'd been at university since I was up to being 21. So I'd not been a pro for that long, really. So a lot of these players that are in that picture there, Franny Lee and Belly and all them, Neil Young, you know, they were my heroes when I used to watch City. Like,
so if we go over the page into the team group, so Paul, this is you and your pomp with the Manchester City team. So if you maybe want to take us through some of the players in that squad.
Well, I tell you, the first thing that strikes me is the number of local lads that are in this team. So top left is Roger Palmer. Futch, they bought from Luton. Tommy Booth played, got 600 games. Joe Corrigan, the same for Man City. Kenny Clements, a lad from Oldham. Belly, they bought from Bury, but pretty local anyway. Then Tony Buck. Then middle row is Gary Buckley, who was his brother Mick Buckley actually played for Everton, and he was a young player from sort of Wythenshawe, where I was from. Then Tony Henry came from the northeast. Willie Donachie, obviously from Scotland, but both of those were there at City as juniors. Ray Ranson the same, and a lad called Russell Coughlin, who was a Welsh lad, but had been brought up at City as from a youth age. Gary Owen, Peter Barnes, both sort of local to the area. Kiddo, who was much travelled with Man United, Arsenal, and Everton, but he came, he actually came from Manchester. Dave Watson was from Nottingham, I think, but he came from Sunderland. Asa Hartford, Scotland. Mick Shannon from Southampton, down south. Jed Keegan was a lad from Sale. So the number of players on that team sheet that were from the Manchester area. We actually played in 1976 a semi-final of the League Cup. Do you remember Dennis Stewart's overhead kick in the final against Newcastle? We played the semi-final against Middlesbrough when Graham Souness was playing for them, and they had a good side, Stuart Bowman, people like that. And there were 10 out of the 11. I think there was only Asa Hartford who wasn't from Manchester. You know, so how times change, it's quite unbelievable, really. Yeah. But great, like I say, the backbone of the team. You know, you'd have Joe Corrigan, Dave Watson, Asa Hartford in the middle of the park, and then Kiddo and Mick Shannon up front. Then but you had great wide players as well, like Peter Barnes. You know, Dennis Stewart was in the side as well, playing wide on the right, and so yeah, we had a good balance, of a team really.
Asa Hartford and Kenny Clements there, both sporting the hairstyle of the period, which was a perm.
Yeah. Kiddo's got a bit of a perm going on there as well, like, you know, on the front row.
I've saw that there's a photograph I have of him at Arsenal, and it shows you him sort of from behind, but he's looking behind, and I've never seen anybody with more hair in my life. It's
Yeah.
ever.
His philosophy was, you know, he always used to say, if you've got a chance to shoot and you don't shoot, then, you know, you're stupid. He always used to say, if you don't buy a raffle ticket, you won't win a prize. That was his. That was a saying that I always remember from him, and it was a saying that I used in coaching. You know, when he was coaching the likes of Graham Sharp and Inchie and all them, I used to say to him, "Hey, if you don't buy a raffle ticket, you won't win a prize," as if it was my saying, like, you know. So,
which I'm guessing you took to heart in the Ipswich game in the semi-final when the free kick.
Yeah. Well, I tell you a story about that as well. Is that was in extra time. It was the 100th minute of the game when we got the free kick on the edge of the box. Dave Bennett, who's on that.
The end, yeah.
On the photograph there, standing next to Bill Taylor on the back row, next to Colin Bell, and he got fouled by Beattie, I think it was, and the free kick was Steve McKenzie was on the ball. He'd knock it to me, I'd let it go through my leg to Tommy Caton, who'd go and strike it with his sweet left peg, like, you know. And anyway, as we were walking off at the end of the game, I think it was the little Eric Gates said to me, he was walking off with his boots under his arm, and I said, I think you'll find out there's half an hour extra time to play. And he went, and he said, well, if that's right, you can have it. And I thought, well, I hope all your mates think the same way, like, you know. Anyway, I think it was Eric Gates who was supposed to close the ball down at the end of the wall. You know, you always had a player on the edge of the wall who came and closed the ball, and then I would knock it on for Tommy Caton to strike it. Nobody came off the end of the wall, so I just thought of Kiddo, really. You know, it was if I don't buy a raffle ticket here. And the goalkeeper wasn't that big, Cooper. You know, he wasn't the biggest goalkeeper in the world. Good shot stopper. But I thought, well, I'll in for a penny, in for a pound, like, so. It's probably the best decision I ever made in my life, to be fair.
I'm sensing a theme here, Paul, and that's 3 goals that you've scored that you've talked about, and you're blaming the goalkeeper on every single one of them. You should maybe take some credit.
Yeah, maybe, but I didn't score that many, you know what I mean? So when I did, it's probably the goalkeeper's fault anyway.
Brilliant. I mean, looking at the photograph, it's a brilliant team photograph, brilliant classic Umbro Diamonds kit. It's I mean, that for me, kit wise, those were the best kits for me. Was those Umbro Diamonds and the Admiral kits, maybe a bit earlier.
Yeah. Well, we had a director of the football club who was a director in the days of Peter Swales, called Mr. Humphreys. And he had like 2 or 3 brothers, and they owned, it's Umbros, BRO, it means brothers. And so Umbros, you know, they had their factory in Wilmslow. So, you know, it was inevitable that we would wear the Umbro kit until Franny Lee took over as chairman. He set a deal up with Kappa. We wore Kappa sportswear for it, but it was a darker blue. It wasn't the nice light blue that you associate with Man City, like, you know. So yeah, and then everything changed after that, really, you know. But I associate sort of sky blue, Manchester City colours always.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess we just go over the page there. There's just a few wee pen pictures of some of the players that we've been talking about, and a few wee snaps there. Peter Barnes, and there's a wee picture there of the away strip of that era there with the white shirt with that red and black.
Yeah, I love that kit. Yeah, I think that might have been one introduced by Malcolm Allison, because Crystal Palace, I think they used to play in a similar kit.
Yeah.
but yeah, I love that kit, and I thought it was a really smart outfit.
Yeah, Crystal Palace are, when I talk about kits and some of my favourite kits, Crystal Palace are up there for quite a few of their kits were absolutely brilliant. They had a sort of blue and burgundy stripe one as well, which was really good.
Yeah.
That's another one.
Yeah, brilliant times, great. I mean, Peter Barnes was, different players had different attributes, obviously, but Dennis Stewart was a winger that would frighten fullbacks. You know what I mean? Fullbacks were frightened to death of him when they had the ball. Barnesy wasn't like that. He wasn't aggressive. And when he used to play against Jimmy Case and Tommy Smith, and he was almost frightened to death until he got the ball at his feet, and then he had a games playing intelligence that perhaps not an academic intelligence. I had an academic intelligence, but I wish I'd have had his games playing intelligence. You know what I mean? So everybody had the strengths and weaknesses, and but it's finding the right blend. When I worked on this coaches association, when I was at the PFA, Dave Sexton was working in a little working group that we had, and he always said, it's no good having all artists in your football team. You've got to have a mixture of artists and soldiers. The soldiers win it, give it to the artists. So your Nobby Styles gives it to your Bobby Charlton, and then the team. Like, I'd be one of the soldiers. I'd give it to Trevor Francis. He'd go and score a goal, so I get bonus money for that. You know, I mean, I wasn't bothered whether Trevor Francis was going to go and close down fullbacks. Trevor Francis wouldn't play in today's game, certainly not in Liverpool's team, where they're expected to press from the front. But I'd put up with whatever shortcomings he had because I knew that he would win me bonus money every other week, So you tolerate deficiencies, and you just appreciate what they were actually good at, So
Well, you sometimes you hear that even today, where sometimes people criticise strikers and they say, well, all they do is score goals, and you think, well, you put up with that. If all they're doing is scoring goals, they're doing their job, and then you build the team around them so that all they have to do is score goals.
Yeah. What I don't agree with is that they get bonuses for scoring goals. I think scoring goals is a team effort. I look at David Silva for Manchester City, and he must have created God knows how many, and De Bruyne is the same now. Creates chances for fun, and then somebody else might get the bonus money for sticking it in the net. But I don't agree with that. But that's something possibly that agents have brought into the game when they're representing their striker players, But no, I think it's a team game, and that's the way it should be. And that's why teams like Liverpool, Man City are having the success that they're having at the moment, because they're all in it together. You can see that. When I watch the game that we played against Spurs at Wembley, and the game is so stretched, it's unbelievable. When you watch games now, everything is congested into probably between 30 and 40 yards between the defenders and the front players. Win the ball high up the pitch, all go together. There's no room to play, and you can only play out by having clever players, and playing one-touch football. The game is totally different nowadays, but an absolute joy to watch.
All right then. I know we've hit sort of just over the 2 hour mark. Is there anything else in the magazine, Andy, that you spotted, or Paul, that you saw that you maybe wanted to touch on?
No, not really. They, if I was going to talk about people that I played against directly, I've already mentioned Franz Carr, who was an absolute flying machine. But I was quite quick as well. But I wasn't as quick as him. So if he knocked it past me and then got the crossing, I knew full well that Nigel Clough wouldn't be in the box because he couldn't run that fast either. You know what I mean? So he'd be crossing into an empty box. Jimmy Case, I mentioned, was a hard player to play against. I've not mentioned Pat Nevin, who was not quick and would never run away from you, but he'd beat you by turning away from you, having quick feet, and then he'd run with the ball inside. You know, he was he'd run inside with most wingers would go on to the right. Most right wingers would go onto the right foot and cross it for the striker. Pat used to run inside and then slide it in for Kerry Dixon, or whoever was making the run to score the goal. So he was a different one to deal with. But probably my most difficult opponent of that era would be Steve Coppell, who features on, I think, the front page of the magazine. Steve Coppell was dead honest. You know, he had ability to beat you and get a crossing. But I knew if I ran past Steve Coppell with the ball, I knew that he would chase me until he won it back. You know, there are some players that if you run past them, they give up. But he was so honest that he would always give, 100% defensively and attacking as well, and had ability to come inside and score spectacular goals from the edge of the box. So I think overall, he would have probably been the most difficult opponent that I played against.
So Tom, I don't think we can miss the opportunity to mention. So something we did in December, Paul, it's called the Scottish Footballer Lookalikes World Cup. So what we did was we created a bunch of footballer lookalikes with a famous lookalike, and you featured in it. So you featured in a World Cup. So what I'm going to show you actually made the final. So
oh really? I wish I had. I wish I had have featured in a World Cup final. But there you go.
Let me see if I can share with you Well, firstly, I'm going to share with you the semi-finalists. Right. So this was the second semi-final. So we have Bertie Miller of East Fife as a lookalike for Robert De Niro, who you mentioned earlier on. And
yeah, sure.
Peter McQuaid, also of East Fife. And I don't know if you're aware of the Scottish comedian Kevin Bridges.
I do. I know the face. Yeah.
So we first did this World Cup in 2017, and this was the final. These two, and Robert De Niro and Bertie Miller won the final.
Right. Yeah.
Look at the other semi-final. Can you see that?
Yeah, but I don't know who it is.
Yeah, I suspected maybe you wouldn't. Ben Stiller. So he was in like a Zoolander, but this.
Yeah. I know Ben Stiller. Yeah.
I think this is from Dodgeball. So so we give you an international wildcard invitation.
Oh, that'll do for me.
And the other, you were up against Andy Anderson of Partick Thistle. And are you aware of that touched up fresco where it was an old Spanish woman went and tried to touch up this painting of, I can't remember who it was. It was a painting, but this is what it turned out to be. So Andy Anderson and that touched up fresco.
Right, yeah.
For the semi. So you went on to meet.
I should think so. I deserve to beat him then as well. But
yeah. So you went on to meet Peter McQuaid and Kevin Bridges in the final, and unfortunately, the final went against you. But to get to the final was an absolutely cracking.
Well, there you go. There you go. See, that's the story of my life: is to get to the final and then get beat. So maybe I've still got time left in me to go on and win a final somewhere. We'll see. But really good. Nice one. I think it's the eyes with Ben Stiller, isn't it? I think they're a bit beady, the same as mine.
Yeah. It was a very popular choice. There was a lot of people rooting for you, but I think there was just a bigger following for.
Yeah, too much for me. That too much of a likeness, really, below.
So we did that. We did, as I say, we did that throughout December, and it was for. We tried to raise money for a charity partner, which we do on the podcast, which is called the Western Bartonshire Community Food Share. So I'm just going to read out a little bit here about them. So this charitable organisation provides various services and support to the local community, including the following: school uniform bank, school holiday brunch bags, food provisions, Christmas toy bank, cooking and growing lessons, and a baby bank. They provide essential support to the local community and supporting individuals and families, and we'll be looking to support them any way we can through the podcast. This will include drives for donations of food, money, support in the form of volunteers, and we'll also be raising awareness of the group to highlight the work that they do, but also to ensure that families and individuals who can benefit are aware that these vital services actually are out there. You can follow them on the West Dunbartonshire Community Food Share group on Facebook or West Dunbartonshire communityfoodshare.co.uk for the website. But you can also donate through our Just Giving page for the charity at justgiving.com/fundraising/shootthebreeze. And also keep an eye on our Twitter accounts, shoot_TB_podcast and Scott's Footy Cards for updates and news on our partner. So that's something we try and do as well, is to raise awareness and do some fundings and get some donations for.
Brilliant. It sounds similar to sort of in a lesser degree than that Marcus Rashford's involved with, like, you know, with great, wonderful,
excellent. So should we, Tom? You want to?
I don't know. We're just going to wrap up. Paul, I appreciate you coming. I appreciate you coming along and giving up a couple of hours of your evening to come and speak to us.
Yeah.
Listen, it's easy when you're locked down, like I am in Manchester. You know what I mean? I could have gone on for 4 hours really, because I'm not doing much else.
So what I'll say, Paul, is that, so as I say, I collect magazines. These are 2 duplicates of the one that we've spoke through. So what we'll do is, if it's okay, I'll get your address off Tom, as if Tom got email or something, and whenever I come through some stuff that's got any articles on yourself, I'll just pop them in the post to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Like I said, I do also have a card of you as well.
Right, yeah.
The very face.
Is that Ben Stiller? Was that Ben Stiller?
Yeah. So we'd like to say a special thanks to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for the use of Story of the Blues and the music for our show, and you can catch up with Pete on petewiley.co.uk. We'd also like to give a shout out to the terrific What Happened to You podcast, which you've been on, hosted by Mark Godfrey. And you can follow them on Twitter at WHTYpod and subscribe to their podcast, where they put all focus on questions from magazines to the players and see how their answers fare these days. And lastly, we'd also like to thank our producer Diane Jardin for her great work and support as always. Please check out transmissionroom.co.uk, where you can book music recording and rehearsal facilities in Clydebank. So before we go, just what's happening with yourself at the moment? Are you going to get back home tomorrow, or are you going to be stuck in the UK for now?
Yeah, no, we're actually going back on Sunday.
Right.
Only because it's easier to drive. A lot of lorries are off the motorway on Sundays abroad, like in France and Spain. So we're going back on Sunday, but I've got to get a COVID test. Myself and Julie have got to be tested 72 hours before we get the Channel train. Yeah. And also I've got to sort the dog out. So he's got to have a new set of papers. His old sort of passport isn't relevant anymore after Brexit. Yeah. So yeah, all changed really.
Yeah. So what are you doing over in front? Are you involved with any organisations or any charities or that yourself?
No, not at all. I just we just have a house which I bought, which has a gîte next to it. Mm-hmm. We used to rent the gîte out to people during the summer. Now we it tends to go to friends and family, pretty much during the summer, you know, and but it's great to see lots of people come over. But obviously last summer was difficult because of the situation in England and in France. It's just as awkward there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't really support a charity as such. You know, if friends come along and do something, like there was a group of cyclists who cycled past our house, and they were raising money cycling from Barcelona to Manchester. Mm-hmm. So, we sort of get involved in little things over the years, but nothing specific.
Okay. Listen, again, just a big thank you for doing this. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. And, there was a lot more in there. We could have kept talking for hours, I guess. But I guess we've all got to get some sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. And Tom?
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely brilliant, Paul. I really appreciate you taking the time. And maybe if we do it again, we'll look at an Everton era. We never really spoke about your time at Everton too much.
That's okay. I've enjoyed looking back, and especially this week, because Colin Bell passed away. He was like one of my heroes.
Yeah.
An absolute gentleman. Never swore. Never ever swore. The worst he would swear was Ruddy. You Ruddy this or you Ruddy that, and he was so respectful of people around him. Like Nijinsky, we used to call him, because he could run forever. Top bloke.
Brilliant. Okay, so again, thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Follow the podcast. And what we do as well, Paul, is when we release a podcast, we have a web page as well where we share all the scans and images from the magazine, so people can follow along while they listen to this as well. And like I said, we'll include videos of your goals, and we'll write up how great they were, and the goalkeepers really made a valiant effort.
Yeah. You'll see for yourself. I'm telling the truth.
No, again, thank you, and thank you, Tom, for being Tom.
Thanks, Andy.
And again, thank you for listening. Until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.